Welcome back, everybody, to another thrilling episode of Thrive Street Program with Coach 2J. This is your host, Jeremy Jones, and today we're going to talk about avoiding silly injuries like rope burns, as well as this awesome new workout we've got with rope climbs. So, I mention this in videos pretty regularly, but there are certain injuries that are completely avoidable. Things like hand tears, rope burns, scrape shins on the barbell or the box. All those things have a much higher likelihood of happening or almost exclusively happen in CrossFit style gyms, but we can avoid them just by through coaching and experience. And we just want people to understand that we should avoid them. Now, I can't say we can get rid of them completely, but for things like rope burns, for example, having proper foot technique, using the proper style where we are using the S style, where we're taking the rope. How do I draw this? Let's see. I'm going to draw it this way, where the rope goes up and over the foot, and then the other foot is locked in on top, where we stand on the rope. This is now usually what happens is where people's shin gets rubbed right here, but if done properly, usually it's on the way down. People will slide down, and if you pop the rope off the knee when they come down, they're not going to see rope burns. But of course, wearing proper gear like socks will prevent that. The full leg wraparound that we see in a lot of military training is a slightly different style of rope climb, but that's guaranteed to get rope burns if you're going up and down a whole bunch, right? Especially down, and you're not wearing boots and long pants. So we can avoid these sort of quote-unquote silly injuries when people sort of ignore them, and then especially rope burns, which tend to cause the infections because people rubbing the bottom of their shoes onto this rope. And how often do you really clean your rope? So always remember, you should be spraying disinfectant on your ropes at least once a month, and especially, it doesn't have to go the whole thing. Really, it only needs to be about 6 or 7 feet up, down to the bottom, because that's where people's shoes are rubbing the most. And you can use a disinfectant spray, spray it in and let it soak overnight, and that'll also help prevent that people from getting, when they do get rope burns, from getting infections. But that always causes that scarring. Same thing goes for hand tears. People should understand what workouts are potentially likely to rip their hands. They should be filing their calluses and keeping their calluses soft and supple. They should be breaking things up into smaller sets, and they should also know what it feels like to start feeling a tear start, so they can change their movement or change what they're doing so they don't make it worse, right? And ultimately, there is a little bit of a risk when we do this style of training, because we are moving quickly, we're moving heavy loads, and sometimes under stressful conditions or straining conditions with like the load of the clock or whatever. And if we don't want to add any additional risk to this, so that's what I mean by quote unquote silly injuries. These injuries are completely avoidable. Again, can't eliminate them completely, but just by being smart and not doing stupid stuff. Because there's enough risk already in this style of training. All right, so we got our dynamic warm up, and then we are ending it with these with the barbell stuff. Just remember, let people start the stuff before class. Usually on Sundays, people will come in a little bit early and have them start working through a couple rounds of this. Do one round together, and then have everyone get their barbells and get started. Don't do any whiteboard talk. Just get through this little barbell complex before anything. And then when you're doing some maybe some rolling out, some foam rolling on the hips or whatever, or maybe working on the posterior chain before these deadlifts, you can say, okay, after we finish this mobility, we're going to do some skill work with some deadlifts, because there's some deadlifts coming up in the next week or so. And then we're going to do the workout with some rope climbs, and then you can talk about avoiding silly injuries while they're doing their hip activation or mobility. Then we're going to spend 10 minutes working on challenging banded deadlift or banded sumo deadlift. If you haven't experienced having people who have a lot of experience with the sumo deadlift, it's kind of a fun time to practice it. You can talk about how it lowers the center of gravity of the person, so changes the range of motion, so you don't have to pull as high, and how sumo deadlifts might be considered a little bit more functional when you think about lifting up something like a couch or a heavy piece of furniture. You're going to plant your feet wide and your hands are going to be narrow. It's not exactly the sumo deadlift we see with the barbell, but you can see how that's different than a conventional deadlift. So it's kind of fun to play around with that other variation. And of course, the banded version means you're going to, if you have your barbell here, you're going to wrap the band. So this is your shoe. You're going to wrap a band over and around over to the other shoe, and back and connected, right? And so they're just standing on it. And so it should have people start pretty light, And then of course what happens is there's little to no tension at the bottom, and as they stand up it gets harder. So it's going to significantly impact how much weight they can lift, which is kind of neat because it matches most people's strength curve, right? So they're going to be weakest at the bottom and strongest at the top, and this is that accommodating resistance that you might have heard about. So it does help people who struggle with lockouts. We're not going to go that heavy today, but it's good for people to understand that this is one of the techniques they can use if they struggle with lockout on their deadlifts. All right, Manila Madness. So this is like Manila rope, I guess is where I got the name from. We're going to start with some either rope laydowns, 2 rope climbs, or 3 rope climbs, depending on where people are at. The scale up is legless rope climbs, which will be pretty spicy. But it's going to be 4 cycles. So you're going to do the rope climb buy-in, and then we're going to do max round. So that rope climb should take about 60 to 90 seconds to do those rope climbs. And again, people should be very present and aware and not do anything silly that's going to give them rope burn, taking their time or whatever. Now, if you don't have enough ropes, you can always stagger this. Again, about a minute should be enough. If people can't do their 2 or 3 rope climbs in a minute, then they just move on, right? So it's, or they could try to share a rope with somebody. They could wait longer than a minute, but they'll have to let the person go at 1 minute, and then they can jump back on it. But you can stagger people 1 minute if you have a lot of people who can do rope climbs and you don't have that many full height ropes. Obviously, if you have people doing rope laydowns, it's best if you have the short ropes tied to a pull-up bar so they're not taking up the main ropes. That's another thing you can do. But like I said, if you stagger people, even if you did 2-minute staggers, it won't add a crazy amount of time to this. It's 4 cycles with 2-minute rest, so a 6-minute cycle. Total time with the last minute rest would be 24 minutes. So we can subtract 2, so it's 22 minutes. So you've got lots of flexibility there. And so after they finish the rope climb buy-in, then we're going to do 10 hang muscle cleans and then 40 feet of broad jumps. And we did some broad jumps earlier this week in skills, so people should kind of understand some of the mechanics, but you still will want to go over it with people. And these 2 movements are very similar, right? So we want to make sure they understand this is a hip movement and then a slightly different hip movement. And we want to rep this out so that we get a little bit of that intensity in there. And of course, the 2-minute rest is there so that people can go back into the rope climbs fresh and then hit those rope climbs hard. Now, if you want to have a team version, like again, if you have a lot of people and very few ropes and you don't want to do stagger starts, you can have them do the team version, which is where you're going to do teams of 3, where you basically have one person climbing the rope the whole time. And then you can rotate who that person is. And then the other 2 people are just going to keep doing hang muscle cleans and broad jumps, right? So you have one station, which is the rope climbs, and the other 2 people are just doing rounds of the hang muscle cleans and broad jumps, and then they can split it up and rotate however they want. It takes 3 rope climbs to get 1 additional round. So they're going to count. You're only counting rounds. You're not counting the rope climbs when you're doing this individual version. You only count it if they're doing the team version. But because on the individual version, everyone's doing the same amount. So that way, if you have people who can get teams that can get a lot of rope climbs in, that can make a big difference. But they still have the 2-minute rest, right? So it's not, sometimes when I do the team version, there's no rest in there because it's work rest. Well, this one, all 3 people are working the whole time. So we're still going to keep that 2-minute rest in there. But now it is a Sunday, and this isn't, because there's a lot of rest and everything in there, and people may want a little extra. We added this the cash out and the hypertrophy. But that's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot, and drive on.